Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Multifamily Hangout. Chris and I are super duper excited for the guest we have with us in the studio today. Before we go to the guest and the intros, I want to acknowledge our guests, our sponsors, our friends that are making this podcast possible. Uh, I want to extend a special shout out to our esteemed sponsor, Apartment Snapshot, their revolutionary platform, the first gamified performance and employee engagement tool designed explicitly for multifamily professionals is transforming the way we approach performance and employee engagement in this industry. I also want to thank our new sponsor, GPS Roof Leak Repair, for their help and for their partnership. With this being said, I'm going to pass it on to Chris. Chris, take it away and please welcome our guest for today.
Absolutely. Well, our guest today is a very renowned writer, experienced operating officer at several companies. He's giving, he's a mentor, he's incredibly helpful with his time to others. I think about the way he shares verbally and the way he writes. It's definitely helped me, not just the way I think in this industry, but the way I think about life and about helping others, about legacy, and even how I think about each day. So without further ado, I want to welcome Mike Brewer to the podcast today. Thanks for joining us.
Wow, thanks, Chris. I really appreciate those kind words, and I will receive them. I'm not very good at doing that sort of thing, but I receive that and really appreciate it. But thanks for having me, guys. We're very much looking forward to this.
Of course. Thanks for taking the time, everyone in the audience here. There's going to be a lot of questions coming through. But first, I'd love to hear in your own words a little about your story. So how you got into multifamily and the career you've built so far.
Well, I'll try to give you the Reader's Digest version because I'm approaching 30 years, and that's a very long bit of time. But I got into the industry way back in 1995 or 1996 on the heels of starting a landscape company. And the landscape company is important because it introduced me to real estate brokers in my local town. And I was prepping their lawns and doing various work for them to get their houses ready to sell. And one of the brokers asked me if I wanted to sell real estate. So I said, sure, I'll try that, and went to work for Remax Town and Country. Learned very quickly that I didn't like the feast and famine of single family home sales. So I started buying assets, accumulated like 11 single family homes, and then met a girl, gave all the real estate to my parents, and actually went back to finish college at Texas Tech University and went to work as a leasing consultant in a traditional multifamily building. Fast forward, I spent time in all of the positions in traditional multifamily, from leasing consultant all the way up to the chief operating officer, most recently chief operating officer at Radco Residential, based here in Atlanta. So 30 years in the business, worked for privately held firms and also worked for equity residential in the publicly traded space. So it's been a rich career.
Mike, Chris mentioned something that's very important to me personally, right? And that's legacy. So I do want to ask you, how important is legacy for Mike Brewer? What are you looking, or what are you hoping to leave behind after your career in multifamily is over?
That's a great question. I think the thing that is most important to me is that I am in a position now to give back to an industry that has given so much to me over the years. And if I'm remembered for anything, it is just that at the appropriate time, after I gleaned a lot of skills, a lot of perspective, a lot of mentorship and coaching from just some incredible people in the industry, that I turned around and gave that back to the up and coming generation. And my hope is that I've done that through sharing in videos, sharing in podcasts, sharing in blogs, in different medias. But that would be what I'd want to be known for when I leave this great industry.
Awesome. And Mike, I think when we're thinking a lot about the challenges that come up, you've probably seen unheard of challenges. You've probably worn a lot of hats in different organizations. So, as you're thinking about the balancing of these common challenges that we see and how you think about implementing new technology, what's your thought process? Like, do you have a process you like to go through? And then how do you overcome these challenges that you're thinking about with new technologies?
Yeah, technology is a big word as it relates to the multifamily space, and I've been around so long that I can really validate the remark that our industry has been behind forever. But I do think that changed in the last couple of years. There was a real groundswell of activity as it relates to prop tech, and I think it got maybe a little ahead of its skis or over its skis in that there was a lot of technology created uh, to solve problems that we didn't necessarily have or weren't really all that important. So I think to answer your question, the way that I went about trying to evaluate technology and the impact that it would make in the multifamily space was that I invited a lot of those startups onto my podcast so that I could get a real look under the hood, if you will, and try to understand the problems that they were trying to solve in our industry. But if I think about that in the context of an organization, I think it was really important. We had what we call the business case scenario, and any technology that was going to be introduced into our organization, we ran it through the business case, which included making sure that we put out an RFP so we knew precisely what problem we were trying to solve. We invited the appropriate vendors or supplier partners to the table and allowed them to pitch their opportunities to us. And then we thought through everything from change management to implementation to integrations. So the business case gave cause for all those questions to be asked and answered before we actually implemented anything. But I think process is important when you're introducing anything into an organization, because uh, it's not just exciting because it's new and it's shiny. There is a real impact on the human when you implement new technology. So you need to understand that from soup to nuts before you actually put anything in place at your organization.
I like to stay a little bit more on technology, Mike, and I know you're super passionate about technology, as both Chris and I are as well. I work for large organizations, very large organizations, that their tech stack looks like the Apple Store. When you go and you get access to what's available for technology, it literally looks like an app store. I couldn't even I never counted, but for sure like 70, 80, 100 different like pieces of technology that are available now.
Mhm.
For some of us, they're just available, right, as tools, which I think is great, right? It's amazing.
Mhm.
But then for some positions, there are certain pieces of tech that are mandatory. And I heard something that really strike me in a profound way. I heard this at PropTech back in November. Someone was talking about their leasing agents being required to be proficient in about 50 something, pieces of tech. And then somebody else replied and said, well, you're still good because our number is like 63 or 67. So this leads me to the next, I guess, statement. I think we got to a point where we're punishing people with technology in many cases, right? uh, how do first of all, do you agree that this is like an industry-wide challenge? Do you see the same things? And secondly, for that piece that you see where you agree with me more or less, right, uh, how do you see us overcoming that challenge?
Wow, I'll have a very hard time answering the second part of that question. The first part of that question, I would say yes. I will validate that remark in that Mary Gwynn, for example, from Apartment Dynamics, I heard her say that on a podcast. I think it was Paul Mark's podcast several months ago. She had like 50 or 60 different technologies that the leasing consultants, or even property managers for that matter, had to log into, not on a daily basis, but certainly throughout the course of a month. Um, and then I also heard somebody else say that recently. Oh, no, I'll tell you what it was. We were going through an exercise at Radco Residential recently where we were laying everything out on a wall. And we were going through all the pieces of technology that we have in place to serve residents, to serve team members, to serve vendor partners, even to serve investors. And it was north of 60 different technologies or platforms that we had to log into over the course of a given month. So I think that problem is real. I think that problem, at least in the near term, is here to stay. I think, I'll try to say this kindly, I think that there are some legacy software systems in our space that make it very, very difficult to create what I'd call a single stack solution. I'm a best of breed. I love best of breed. I love startups. I love guys who are out solving problems in garages or trying to introduce that stuff into our space. And I want those people to thrive and those individuals and their organizations to thrive. But there are some legacy technologies in our space for all the right reasons, if you think about it from a business perspective, that make it very hard to do business, to collect data, to extrapolate data out of systems, put that data to use. And I think until we solve that problem, until we come together as an industry, because I think it's going to be solved on the industry and ownership side, it might be, we're just going to have to potentially live with this overabundance of technology in the systems that we have to use and the systems that our teams have to use. I wish I had a better answer, but I'm just not super bullish and optimistic that we're going to solve that in the near term.
I do love that you're a realist and you're honest about what you know and what you don't know. It's funny because you have the vlog and you put out videos and content. And it was funny because I was like telling you how, I think recently I was telling you, I said, your content is so great. Like, and I was catching up on some of the daily vlogs you do. And I think, it's incredible. You can correct me if I'm wrong. It's the Multifamily Collective. And you may have different brands, but I just learned that you had a blog. I didn't know you were actually writing it too every day. So what I love is these little snippets of what you're talking about here around, not being able to solve everything, but taking it one day at a time. And I think you've influenced so many awesome people out there, right? To just take action, whether it's operators, investors, and then even, like you said, supplier partners, because everyone has something to contribute to the conversation around this. But tell us a little bit more about like how you started getting into the vlog, how you got into writing, and tell us like what keeps you going, because I think you've been doing this now for several years.
Yeah, it's I'm in my 17th year, coming up on my 18th year of creating content. I was actually writing blogs back when that sounded like you were clearing your throat, not an article on the internet. But started blogging back in 2006, 7 plus minus. And my first blog was Mike Brewer on Stuff and Things. That gave way to Apartment Hacker, and that gave way to what you know today is the Multifamily Collective. So we have over 2,000 articles that we put out about the multifamily industry and multifamily space. And then the vlog started in 2016. As of tomorrow will be my 8th anniversary of creating vlog content. And that started out really is a way for me to get comfortable behind a camera. I knew at that point in my career that I wanted to grow into higher levels of responsibility. And I knew that with higher levels of responsibility, public speaking was a real thing. You would have to feel comfortable getting up in front of people and speaking. For those of you who don't know me, I'm very much an introvert, very shy. Don't like super big social situations and circumstances, but I knew I needed to do that. So I started the vlog in an effort to get really comfortable behind the camera, thinking that someday that would get me really comfortable in front of an audience. And that's what it did. It really wasn't built to try to provide any value or any kind of guidance or counsel to the industry. It was really my effort to build a skill called public speaking. And that's how I got to where I am today. So now we have some almost 2,000 videos that we have put out over the course of the last 8 years. And then that married up with the writing that I've done over the last 17 years.
Well, I could tell you, Mike, that no matter what your intentions were, but you've been an inspiration for so many of us, me included. And I always looked up to you. Up to this day, I still am looking up to you as a, not just as a professional, as an accomplished individual, but also as someone that found value in this way of communicating, the vlog type, the blog, and also content, video and written content in general speaking, right? This brings me to the next question. Next question is something that just broke the internet today. Multifamily Media Network, right? It's a new project of yours. You're driving this project, so I want you to share with us what is how this is project came about. How was, what started like the idea of this project of multifamily media network, and what has been evolving towards, and what should we expect from it in the near future?
Well, Adrian, first and foremost, let me thank you for bringing that up as a topic today. Today was our launch day, and I know we were talking pre-recording here or pre-live stream, and you said something that was very profound to me and very meaningful in that this is not a competition. You could argue that we put something out like this into the world and we're just competing with all the other blog or podcasters and other media offerings from companies, from individuals, etc. But I agree with you. It is not a competition, and it really is an effort. Multifamily Media Network is an effort to curate and bring voices to the multifamily space from people who don't necessarily, they wanted to do a podcast, but they didn't necessarily want to do all the work that is behind the scenes germane to producing a podcast. So what Multifamily Media Network is an opportunity for people to come set up a podcast, really just show up and do the recording, and then give the video and the content to us at the media network, and let us do all the production on the backside and all the distribution through the 85,000 email subscribers that we have, and through the social networks that we have collectively and independently. So we're handling basically the branding of all the podcasters and all the production and distribution for their efforts and their creation. What we have to look forward to is really, in the early innings, we're just going to really support these individuals. We're going to invite sponsors in, not unlike you're doing, to put their sponsorships against that content that we're creating. Hopefully bring more awareness to those supplier partners that are trying, but certainly bring some valuable educational content through the podcasters and the creators that we've been able to curate. In the future, I imagine that it will evolve. I have a very grand vision. I don't necessarily want to share the grand vision right now because it's still coming to be in my head. But when it does come to be, certainly there will be more to look out for.
Awesome. That's I'm excited to see this, and excited to see more opportunities for people to share their opinions, and especially partnering with you, they're going to be successful. So, something on this topic around leadership, right? You write, you talk a lot about leadership, and even share a lot of examples. So if you could share today, maybe some of the qualities that you think are some of the top qualities that effective leaders need to demonstrate, especially in multifamily. I even think like some things I've heard you speak about, intentionality, and being intentional, right? You're very intentional, and I'm sure you've worked at that, having difficult conversations, and even you talk about saying no so you can say yes to the right things. But can you share like some of the things that you think leaders have to work on?
Yeah, that's a great question, Chris. And I think you've hit some of the majors. For me, and first and foremost, it's be of good character, right? And what do I mean by that? Be trustworthy, have integrity, keep your side of the street clean, do what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it. And if you, and fundamentally, just be a kind person. I think that leaders sometimes, especially the youth in our world, show up and they think leadership is position. They think, I need to be the vice president of this organization. I need to be the president of this organization tomorrow, but they don't understand that it really is time and reps and showing up and being present and doing all those things that I just described, and doing it with consistency, a great level of consistency. I think that a lot of times people get emotionally loaded in circumstances or in situations, and their true self comes out. I think that people who are able to emotionally regulate themselves with emotional intelligence, married together with some hard skills, are the people who will be the true leaders in our industry, in industries across this great country. But really, it is showing up on a consistent basis with a high level of character. That's what I'd probably boil it down to.
I do want to switch a little bit towards multifamily operations. And given the current economic environment, What are the main challenges to overcome? And where do you see opportunities for multifamily operators? I know that we could talk about this alone for hours probably, but we only have, we only have the limited time. So I'm gonna leave it up to you to, to pick and choose what's kind of the essence of what you see happening and what you see that will happen in the near future for operators.
Definitely. I don't think that I have any novel thoughts as it relates to this, and I do think there are people that are much smarter than me as it relates to this. But the way I see it is that the industry, like many industries across the country, are going through a great squeeze. Obviously, interest rates are not our friend. Taxes are not our friend. Insurance costs are not our friend. All these rising costs that are really uncontrollables are not the friends of the industry at the current moment. And what that has done, the byproduct of that is really that every single GL line item on the cost side of the equation, because rents are not growing at 20 and 30% clips like they were several years ago. But it's put a real squeeze on every GL on the cost side of the equation. I think of marketing, for example. I think we were running some pretty good per unit costs on the marketing side because you could frankly afford to spend big money to draw big attention to yourself to lease apartments at big rates. But when everything flipped, what you were spending on a per unit basis was cut in half, if not more. And you were asked to do more with that less. And I think that that is true in most GL line items today. So I think it really highlights, I'm sure we'll talk about this at some point, but whether you label it efficiencies or centralization in the industry, it has really brought that to the forefront. What is really exciting for me is that I think on the downside of every single adversity that ever happens in one's life or in one's industry, that's where real innovation, that's where real creativity and experimentation comes to be. And that's where real, incredibly creative solutions are born. You guys are sitting in an innovation factory right now. I'll call it that for lack of knowing exactly what it's called. But my imagination tells me that there are a bunch of incredibly smart people running around that building that you're in right now, dreaming up some incredible solutions based on the constraints of what is going on in the marketplace today, not only in multifamily, but in other industries. So I'm excited about the future as it relates to this current climate.
Definitely, Mike. It was perfect timing to share that because we're going to be meeting up tonight with some awesome people in the industry. There's some people flying down, I know, from New York and other cities, but I love that around as you were talking about, kind of intertwining leadership and into innovation. And this building, you talked about being kind. This building it's called Atlanta Tech Village. And it was built with the premise of technology companies, right? Having a place that people could come together. I think there's like 1,000 startups here. Adrian and I get to be in the same room. We're literally looking at each other a couple feet away from each other. There's 1,000 people building remotely, in person. There's companies, and this will be a future podcast, Mike, but they just bought 53 buildings and 6 parking lots downtown. And they're redeveloping South Downtown over a 40-year vision. Well, they have built, to your point, they have 4 rules in this building, right? Like be kind is their first rule. It's in the actual password of the internet to this building, right? So kindness, I love that. And Jennifer Carter's talking about kindness in the comments here. But I love that about you because you have to start with that. You have to start with kindness. You have to start with being respectful of others. And that is a true rule of this building and of what they're building downtown, and inclusivity, right? They want to make sure that all Atlantans can have a voice in this new project. So without getting too off topic, I think, you definitely, hopefully, have you met with the team at downtown, at South Downtown or Atlanta Tech Village yet?
I have not. I'm looking forward to doing that someday.
Yeah, you'll definitely have to meet them because they are an incredible team. That a lot of what you just said around technology, around innovation, around building teams and process, but now they're bringing it to real estate, but beyond just the real estate, but actually community, bringing people together. A lot of what you do, right? Collisions down near sports and politics and living and working together in one. So it's going to be exciting to watch. Maybe we'll have to do more podcasts from here, Adrian. But I wanted to, on that point, you talked about a little bit about innovation. So could you share maybe a story around, so many people say they have a great culture. And Adrian did a poll, and I think like 50% of the respondents of that poll around culture said, like, it was confidential, but like 50% of the people said that when the feeling they have doesn't align with what's posted on their website and doesn't align culturally. So I wanted to get your thoughts around that. And if you want to tie in like the thoughts around culture, but also innovation, like how do you get people to feel comfortable with making mistakes, but at the same time, not making anyone feel bad, right? So if you want to tie that up however you'd like.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to unpack there. I'll try to be concise about it. I think that, let me remark on the culture thing first. I think that it's sad to think that the way you feel and the way your organization operates doesn't align. Um, and that's sad because you spend more time in that environment than you do at home. And it really is incumbent upon businesses and organizations to set in place an incredible atmosphere for people to come and thrive as human beings, first and foremost. And that doesn't mean that you hang your problems on a coat hanger and then cross the threshold and come into my business and operate like you don't have problems. It means you bring your whole self into the business, and we support you in any way, shape, or form that we can. Now, understanding that we need a business outcome, I think culture really is a set of processes and procedures and disciplines and routines that we do consistently over time. Now, one would argue it's the field day that we do, the foosballs table that we set up, and all these other things that we do, which are important to build camaraderie and teamwork and those things. But the culture really is those disciplines that are set in place. And I think I would end cap this remark by saying that I believe that really successful organizations, as it relates to culture, have really good disciplines about meetings. Now, before you say, I hate meetings, we do too many meetings, I would say this. If you set up a good discipline of a daily huddle, a weekly meeting, a monthly meeting, a quarterly meeting, and an annual planning meeting, and you do that with very tight agendas, with very tight agenda items, you're doing reps that are building all of those systems and disciplines and routines in your organization. And the expression of that, or the outcome of that, are good business benefits, right? If you measure it by KPIs, you measure it with Swift Bunny, you measure it with other things in the industry, the companies that are really successful at culture are the ones that are really disciplined and consistent about their meetings. And those meetings are the things that make your culture, in this guy's opinion.
Before going to the next question, Mike, I do want to acknowledge all of you in the audience, say hi to all of you. Drop a comment in a comment box. Ask Mike a question. We're keeping an eye on your comments, and we'd like to hear from you, right? We want to ask Mike questions coming from you. And obviously, thank you for taking an hour of your time today to be here with Chris, myself, and Mike, and just hanging out with us for an hour. It's great to have you on. So culture, how important is culture here, right? Chris just mentioned company culture versus versus real culture, or I guess the perception of culture. You cover that. Young generation. I want to ask about the young generation aspiring leaders, people that are looking up to individuals very accomplished like you, Mike, that uh, reached an executive level, very high level, and they want to become like you. They want to become Mike one day. What are some pieces of advice that you want to share with them?
I'll share a piece of advice that was shared with me a very long bit of time ago, and that was go where the problem. In fact, I'm going to share this book cover. Fall in love with the problem, not the solution. And there's the author. The reason I share that is that if you really aspire to lead well in the industry, go find the problems. Go find the problems in your organization. Go find the problems in the industry. Put pure definition to them. Make sure you're solving real problems that benefit the business or benefit the industry. Don't just chase a problem because it seems interesting and sexy. Go find a real problem. Put pure definition to it, and then go about solving that and do that consistently. And here's what will happen. People will start to recognize you as the solution, you as an individual, as a human, as the solution to any problem that might exist in their business or any problem that might exist in the industry. And all of a sudden your phone starts ringing, your cell phone, or your DMs start blowing up because you're the go-to person. So my piece of advice, the one and only that I'll give, is go chase the problems and become the problem solver. And that will accelerate your career like no other thing that you can do.
I love that. That hits home for me, Mike, because that was me 10, 12 years ago, 14 years ago. We've got the best. We do this. We're X. Don't listen to everything else, right? And then when I, later in life, our products evolved, right? And we had Steve Halsey on here 2 episodes ago. And Steve created a new product because he's like, you're not solving one of our problems. And we actually started building new products. And today that company, Luxor, I'm no longer there, but they keep solving other problems into the future in totally different sectors now. And I think, with my investor hat on, you really hit home, because that's what I've really focused on, is not what you built, but what have you discovered around the problem? And then what problems are you going to solve in the future? So definitely we got to go down the rabbit hole of that, now that I'm on the investing side. But I would love to get your thoughts. You and Adrian have built incredible followings. You've got daily listeners. How do you see, the new media, the new communication platforms evolving, especially as it hits multifamily, right? And multifamily being such a large space. I'm kind of curious to hear, as you're contributing so much to other people, and maybe even oftentimes some of your knowledge you're giving to others. Where do you see media and communication moving in our industry?
Wow, I think we're in the very early innings, right? Some of this technology has existed for a very long time, but I think the masses are starting to adopt it. You see it by the proliferation of podcasts that have come into the into the space as of late. I still think we're in the very early innings of media evolving. I think the way I would answer this question is, let's use LinkedIn as an example. LinkedIn has really been a place where business leaders go to communicate, to network. Really, it's kind of the online version of standing in a room and networking with people. At least that's the way I see it. And you're able to share some content into the stream. I think LinkedIn has become a little bit noisy as of late. I think it's morphing into something that looks more, I'm not going to go so far as to say like a Facebook or even an Instagram, but it's certainly evolved into something that is more akin to that than what it used to be. And so I'm a little bit nervous about what LinkedIn ultimately becomes. I would be an advocate for them governing in some way. Don't ask me what that means. I just think that there needs to be some sort of governing mechanism as it relates to the content that's put out there. I don't know what the right answer is as it relates to putting content into the world and how that sort of speaks to your question. I think that when you democratize the ability to put content into the world, whether it be video or written or otherwise, you have this sort of messy middle that happens. And at some point, that messy middle gives way to what that thing will become. And I think we're probably somewhere in here as it relates to the messy middle, and we're going to get here, but it's probably 2 to 4 years away. I'm purely guessing before we see what would be what I'd consider a real valuable piece of media as it relates to multifamily.
It's a very interesting thought, Mike, and I like to follow up a little bit with a question here. The way I understand the algorithms working for all the platforms, really, because they're trying to get you to stay as much as possible on their platform, is that the type of content that you're consuming they're giving you more off, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
in a way, to me, the way I explain this to myself, it works like a free market, right? What the
Mhm.
public wants, we need to produce more of, in a way, right? We as content creators, we don't have to, but if there's a certain demand out there on the market, that's going to be met somehow. How does that I guess first of all, I'm going to ask you if you agree with this, I guess, assessment. I like to know if you feel the same way. And secondly, if you're in agreement, the second question will be how would that mesh well with, I guess, with some oversight or with some sort of a LinkedIn, I guess, watchdog, or whatever. That it's moderating content in a way, or like it's like pulling content out of the platform, or doesn't give it the reach that it could reach by the simple, uh, supply and demand uh, rules applying to it.
Yeah, I think hopefully this answers your question. I would use this framework. Um, let's compare and contrast you and me, for example. And this is not to put either one of us on the spot, but we have very different strategies as it relates to putting content into the world. I think last I read, you were posting 3 times plus or minus per day on LinkedIn. And you might see me post every once in a while, but my strategy is I'm depositing my content in YouTube and other places. And my strategy, or my hope and my desire, I know hope is not a strategy, but is that other people will read the content or listen to the content or view the content in those other platforms, and then they share that out into the world, right? I'm not doing that. They are. And that is, to me, the big punchline for me is that they saw value in it, so much so that they shared it into the LinkedIn environment. Now, every now and then I post into the LinkedIn environment, and really under the premise of exposing others, right? Or edifying others, or highlighting others, not highlighting Mike Brewer. Now, that doesn't mean Mike Brewer's strategy is the right one. To speak to your point about the algorithm, I think you and Tony Sousa and others put a lot of content out there germane to yourself, which is another good strategy. It's not any better or worse. It's just different. So I agree that we've got to produce content. We've got to put it out into the world. If you want to draw attention to yourself, you need to do that in some way in those distribution networks. But I think you just have to pick a strategy, and you have to be consistent about it, and be true to it. And hopefully you get the desired outcome that you're after.
Is Mike, is there a type of good attention and bad attention, or is just simply attention? What's your take on attention? uh,
That's a great. Like, I'll give you, this is not my novel thought. I heard somebody say that all attention is good attention because people are talking about you. So if it's controversial or not, it's good because you're in the punchline, so to speak. I don't necessarily subscribe to that idea that all attention is good attention. I certainly think that, there are a lot of celebrities that step in it from time to time that get exposed in ways that are cringeworthy. And one might argue that their publicists created or manufactured the circumstance to get their name in the headlines a little more. But I don't know if I go back to character when I think about that, and I think you got to be really careful. My mom taught me that my reputation is everything. My word is gold, right? A long time ago. And I haven't lived 100% true to that my entire life, but I do believe it. And I think you got to show up and try to be a beneficial presence for yourself and for other people.
Love that. I was told the same thing. Like, the highest currency in the world, my grandfather taught me, was reputation. Right.
Mhm.
It takes years and a lifetime to build, and one incident or one moment in your life that can pull it down. Now, as you said, as we're talking about innovation, you get to meet so many people, operators, investors, but you're also meeting supplier partners and people building, founders building great stuff. And I love to meet them too. I think it keeps me, not only excited, motivated about the future, but you can help support these people that build things we want to see. I'd love to hear from you, either some exciting emerging technology you're seeing that are going to have a big impact, and maybe or some spaces that you're really excited about, whether it's AI, maybe hardware, or some other things that you're seeing operationally?
Yeah, so I think again, not novel thoughts here necessarily, but I think AI is certainly going to make an impact in the multifamily space. It's going to make an impact across our industry and across our world. I put out a post recently where I talked about. I've been talking about this, let's say, for 4 to 6 years, literally saying that we need to upskill and reskill, because I read an article. I was literally sitting in a Starbucks in St. Louis, Missouri, 6 or 7 years ago, reading about how AI was going to impact the world and take away jobs. And the premise of the article was upskill and reskill. And so the post I made recently was, look, now is the time. It really back then was the time, but now is the time that you really do have to think about upskilling and reskilling yourself as it relates to AI, because AI does have the ability to really disappear all the rote and routine work that we know to be in the multifamily space today. So Bill Gates had a vision to put a computer on every single desk, whether you're in a business environment or otherwise, so that he could put his software on it, right, and sell it into the world. I really have a grand vision to take away all computers off desks, so that we can get back to seeing each other and do business more relationally than sort of behind a screen or transactionally. Now that's utopian. I know that, but I think AI gives us the ability to disappear a lot of that stuff so that you could actually live in an environment like that, because all of that stuff, my co-pilot, AI co-pilot is going to be talking to your AI co-pilot based on the data that we've been feeding into these social networks for the last 15 to 20 years, plus minus. So I see in the next, who knows, this is lick my finger and wave it in the air kind of thinking, but in the next 3 to 5 years, we really will see an environment where AI has taken away nearly all of the rote and routine work in our businesses today. And the thing I would say, one thing I would say, it's going to impact the corporate environment much more so than it's going to impact the site level in the multifamily industry. So those corporate level jobs that people aspire to get to are the ones that are most exposed. I think about asset management. I think about accounting. I think about all the things that are related to running property management from a global perspective or a corporate perspective, being the ones that are most at risk for AI in the coming years.
In our commitment to staying true to our audience out there, I would like to take a question from the audience, and the question comes from Julio Angel. Julio is asking, what happens when you find the problems and provide solutions, but the organization, your employer, does not want to recognize the flaws in the business?
Great question. So I certainly think that here would be my strategy. I would try to get my direct supervisor to become an advocate for me in selling this, whatever solution this is, right? And if they're not, I would simply say to them, hey, out of courtesy, I want to let you know that I'd like to go to your, supervisor to pitch my idea. I want you to be in support of that, but if you're not, I'm going to do that. And I'm just giving you a heads up that I'm doing it, and then go do that. And if that person is adverse to your idea, try the next level. If you've exhausted that entire hierarchy of decision makers, my suggestion would be go find an organization that is more open-minded as it relates to solutions, and open-minded to team members, no matter your rank in the organization, bringing ideas to the forefront. Some of the best ideas in the multifamily space come from site level team members that are just trying to solve problems. So I would go find I'd go find an organization that supports it, but first I would try to go up the hierarchy with that strategy I just suggested.
Yeah, so that was great, and we'll probably have some more audience questions. I think one of the other things that stood out to me, Mike, from earlier in our conversation that I wanted to kind of go a little deeper on. You said tomorrow is your 8th anniversary of producing, putting out content. You said, I think, over 2,000 videos on different platforms. I think you're at over 1,600 straight days of publishing. Is that right? 1,600 days straight?
I think it's actually, so whatever 8 times 365, I rarely miss a day. So you might be right. I don't know the answer to that question, but it probably is in the thousands.
I had the episodes, your little 2-minute snippets.
Oh, yeah. In the early innings, I was not numbering episodes. So at some point, I started numbering episodes.
So I pull you when I was at On Deck. I worked for someone named Eric Tornberg. It was a great, he's big in investing, and he always talked about shipping, consistent shipping. So I'm what we would call you as a consistent shipper, right? And you're holding yourself accountable. You're consistent. Consistently doing the same thing. You've got your process, and it's helped me. So someone I know we talked about earlier, you're helping me actually to do the same thing. You hold me accountable, getting me to, publish my ideas, to get me to spend more time, to put on my calendar, to write, to put my thesis out, and then to get feedback on my thesis. So I'm kind of curious. I want to hear a little deeper around, how do you stay accountable to yourself? What are the things you're doing that you can maybe share with the audience of whether it's fitness, whether it's health, achieving your goals? When you miss your goals, are there some specific things you could share there around accountability, that you're willing to open up about?
Yeah. So I would sort of preface by saying that I have a superpower, and I'm not ashamed to talk about this. So I have Asperger's, high spectrum, right? So the superpower is that when you have that, you become very focused and very disciplined in everything that you do. So I have that advantage going into my day, or into my life, so to speak. I would say this: I have I get up at 5 o'clock every single morning, and I have a very disciplined regimen that happens between 5 and 7 o'clock that I call prime time, or priming the pump. If you've ever been around a farm yard, you see these spigots that have this pump on the top, and you have to pump the thing to get the water to come out of the spigot. That's priming the pump. So that's where I'm using that as an analogy. So between 5 and 7, I'm priming the pump. I get up, I read. Over here, you would see that I have that are 6 books that are daily readers, to include my own book. I've been reading my own book, but I read those. I read a devotional, biblical devotional. I also read out of the Bible. I read the Bible every year, a day at a time throughout the year. I run. I'm running a marathon on Sunday, but I run at least every other day. I used to run every day, but getting old. But exercise, and then nutrition is certainly very important to me. Sleep is super important. 8 hours, non-negotiable. Otherwise, I feel like I've been out on the town for the night. So I would say sleep, nutrition, definitely feeding your mind with lots of good stuff. Those are really the keys to getting prepped and coming into a day.
Mike, I'd like to take another question from the audience. AJ is asking you, this is like, his question is pretty specific, right? His background is in maintenance. He's a maintenance professional, a technician. He wants to know from an executive standpoint, right? What kind of soft skills do you see as most valuable and important for maintenance and service technicians looking to grow in rank in an industry?
Yeah, the first one is, we've said it several times today, is learn. If you're not a kind person, learn how to be a kind person. I think you really are, in my mind, the front lines of retention, if you will, in the multifamily space. Customer service first and foremost, and you have to show up with a smile on your face. You have to show up in circumstances where people are emotionally loaded because whatever it is not working for them. And it's not you, it's that thing that's causing them to be emotionally loaded. But your ability to stand in a moment like that and be present and de-escalate a circumstance and win a fan, that is probably the most important thing that you can develop in your life. And I would encourage you to read everything that Dan Goleman has ever written, or anything you get your hands on as it relates to emotional intelligence, because that's really that's the foundation. And if you do the reps in that world of emotional intelligence, that skill will serve you, not just in maintenance, it'll serve you in life. It'll serve you in your home life or in your business life.
It's interesting because earlier when you talked about the utopian world, right, or removing a laptop, I think you're great and real person too. People realize how tall you really are. Um, can you slam dunk, by the way, in
I
basketball?
could
You
I
good?
could dunk when I was in college. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, so little nuggets that we would otherwise know. So obviously in our industry, you talked about centralization. Obviously that comes hand in hand with having collaborative tools. It comes hand in hand with remote work. Obviously COVID changed that. What are your thoughts around remote work, whether it's on-site, regional teams, and then also remote work and what it looks like for multifamily at the corporate level? What are your thoughts? And maybe because you've probably seen a lot of that.
Yeah. So I actually started before it was called remote work. I think it was called hoteling, and I started hoteling 9 years ago, plus or minus. And at first, I thought it was really cool. I could go and sit in environments that I felt inspired by, because most of the time, not most of the time, there are times where a corporate environment it either gets so noisy and overwhelming that you can't get a lot of real focus work done, or it becomes so much like a library that it seems like, are people alive here or not alive? So it was neat to be able to go sit in environments where you could feel inspired to do work. But then over time, and especially as it relates to COVID, I started to feel really isolated, and not as productive as I thought I would in a remote environment. And so I think the real answer, and this again, not novel thoughts, but I think the hybrid version of work is probably the sweet spot. I think some bit of time at home or in another environment where you're not distracted and you get to do real work, deep work, is important. But I also think that being together in an environment where you can do mind share, um, brainstorming, whatever you want to call it, or water cooler talk or hallway talk, those things are very important, as it relates to keeping your culture together, and keeping idea flow going. So I'm probably an advocate for a hybrid model of work, and that goes from site level all the way up in this industry. I think there's some version of hybrid that you can put together at every level in the organizations.
Mike, another huge topic in an industry, right, that could take 6 hours easily to 12 to debate, to talk about centralization. To Mike Brewer, is centralization a real thing in an industry? Is it just a buzzword, or is it just somewhere in between these two?
Yeah, so centralization. So I worked at Equity Residential 15 plus years ago, and we were doing centralization at that time. The thing that was different about then versus now is the technology was not caught up. So back then, you would take an assistant manager and give them oversight of 3 or 4 properties, and they might still sit at a property, but they'd be responsible for 2 or 3, and we call that centralization. Today, the technology has really caught up. You think about our very sophisticated CRM systems that are being developed out there. There's some really great ones. Allows, you know, leasing consultants to sell from a distance. The technology for access control has really caught up so that people can do DIY showing or self showing. And so I think, I believe that centralization or efficiency or whatever you want to call it is on the precipice of really changing our industry. And I think it's changing our industry from a system standpoint, but where I really think it's changing our industry is from a business hierarchy standpoint. So I think the real disruption that is going to happen as a result of centralization is our traditional hierarchies that are, presidency, COO, presidents, and all this thing that you have put in place today is going to collapse. And it's going to become flatter than ever because you're going to have the ability to automate, centralize, outsource, or even eliminate complete functions of business so that you can operate with far fewer people than you have in the past. That's where the real disruption is going to happen. We haven't seen it yet, but it's going to happen.
That's definitely something I've heard from some of the work at Google and Facebook is the removal of some of the managers there in some of the announcement. Definitely Gumroad is a good example. He's written a lot about making his team, as you said, more centralized, more remote, and less in between team members to hold them accountable. Is there, I'd love to hear, I think you've got so many great stories that you've shared, and people will definitely go check out your content after this episode. But could you share, from your 20 plus years in the industry, is there a really memorable experience, or maybe even a lesson learned, may even call it a mistake, something back years ago where maybe you'd be willing to share with people, how maybe it shaped you in the multifamily space?
Yeah, this is I have a go-to story for this. I so I believe I had just been promoted into a property manager position, and I was my district manager told me that my regional manager was coming to town, and it was my first experience with having a regional come to town, and so I was very overly excited by that idea. And I got our team together and I made a list of, let's say for sake of conversation, 30 things we were going to accomplish. And I think this was a Monday. She was coming on Thursday. 30 things we're going to accomplish before she actually shows up on the property. And we're just going to blow her away, right? One of those projects included ripping out the floor in our laundry room and laying down a new floor, so that when she came, she would be blown away by the fact that it looked brand new. So Thursday arrives. We may have accomplished 5 or 6 of the things on my list of 30 things to do, because they weren't small projects. They were all very big projects. So when she gets to town, she walks, she's not excited. She didn't walk away with the feeling that I wanted her to have. And my district manager wrote me a long letter, and it led by saying, all the good intentions in the world are worth nothing unless followed through. And I will never, ever, ever forget that. In terms of level setting yourself, you always want to impress, certainly so, but always do that with realism in mind. Anytime you're planning something, just know your intention is always far beyond your capabilities, your realistic capabilities. And so just level set yourself before you go about accomplishing big lists of things to impress other people.
Mike, the journey to the top could feel very lonely at times. That has been at least my experience. Did Mike Brewer experience something like this? And how did Mike Brewer deal with the situation?
Yeah, I think that saying it is lonely at the top is a very real thing. I think the important thing to put in place for yourself is mentors, or Chris, I liked your word, accountability buddy, or other people that are outside of your organization that can hold you accountable or can be your sounding board, or great organizations like YPO or other kind of collaborative type environments that you can join up and be a part of. You have to find people, because when you're at the top in an organization, there are many filters that are put in place that keep information from you or skew information that is coming to you. No matter what kind of environment you have, you could have the greatest culture in the world, but that still happens, that it gets filtered. And you need to have people outside of your organization that act like, I like to refer to it as sandpaper, that are always sanding your edges and keeping you sharp as it relates to running an organization. So it is lonely, but you've got to be intentional about putting mechanisms in place to make it not so.
That's fantastic. I'm going to use that, Mike. I'm going to borrow that sandpaper sharpening example. As my son puts it, he uses the pencil sharpener a lot. He's an artist. So, as you talk about these people who sharpen you and don't detract from you, they help build you up. They make you smarter, help you through your career. They pull up chairs for you. Who are some of the people, whether it's in the industry or maybe even outside the industry, who made a positive impact on your career, or maybe were mentors to you?
Yeah, I hesitate to answer that question because I will inevitably leave somebody off of the list, but I have a great deal of admiration for Lisa Trezine. I just think she is incredibly intellectual, does her homework, and really offers an incredible amount of insight, and has always sharpened my saw along the way. I met her in 1996 in a hotel in Las Vegas in the gift shop. She was buying Michael Jordan magazines for her husband. who was a lover of Michael Jordan. But she has been incredible in my life along the way. Certainly, there's somebody named Jim and Jackie Weismiller, husband and wife team, who really took me on in the early innings. Jackie is the one that was the one I was trying to impress with the floor that we ripped out of the laundry room. I think they're still in the industry down in Austin, Texas. I think outside of the industry, there have, coaches come to mind. I played Division I college basketball at Texas Tech University, and certainly the coaches that I experienced along the way, both head coaches and certainly support team or support coaches, were incredible. My high school basketball coach, there are just a lot of people I could name, and I hesitate to keep going because I'll inevitably leave somebody out.
Mike, as we approaching the end of this amazing conversation, it's been great for Chris and I both. Hopefully, it was great for you too. I think I wanted to ask a question that many in the audience and even those that are not present would like to hear an answer from you. What's next for Mike Brewer?
That's a fantastic question. It's interesting. I pivoted away from Radco Residential recently, and I am very oddly at peace about the decision to step away from that organization. Not because it's a bad organization. They're incredible people. It's an incredible organization, incredible people. I think the future for Radco Residential is off the charts. I'm oddly at peace. I think that I am taking some time to kind of figure out what I want to do when I grow up, so to speak. I think there are some interesting opportunities from some incredible people in this industry that have been put in front of me. And I am certainly looking at each and every one of them as led by, I'm a believer in God, and I think that God has a plan for my life. And I am just really just listening to him and his guidance right now to figure out what is next. So I don't know the answer to your question, but I will certainly let everybody know when it comes to be.
Mike, we appreciate you being here with us today. Very genuine conversation coming from the heart. I could feel that. And you always, you've always been this type of person, whether I met you in person or, just virtually. Thank you so much for being here with us, for taking an hour out of your day. Um, we're very fortunate to have you with us today. We're very fortunate to have you with us as an industry. And so many of us are looking up to you. Thank you again for being here with us. We hope to get you back here soon. Even though now we're, competing, but we're not competing. It's at most for me, it's gonna be a friendly conversation. I love to collaborate more with you. I love to get more of your thoughts right here for us, for all of us. You're just you're an amazing inspiration for us all.
Thank you. That's very kind of you to say that, and I receive it, and I appreciate it. I appreciate you guys inviting me to the show today.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your nuggets, Mike, and can't wait to hear how your marathon goes. Is it next weekend? This coming Sunday?
This coming Sunday in Fort Lauderdale.
Oh wow. Okay. Well, I want to hear any tips and tricks on that because I'm training for a half marathon with my sister. So any tips and tricks you can share after that, please share them.
I absolutely will.
Thank you very much.
Everybody, we're not forgetting you. For those of you in the audience that spend the hour with us, thank you so much for joining, for hanging out with us. We're doing this for you. This is for you only. And we also want to thank our sponsors from Apartment Snapshot and from GPS Roof League Repairs. We hope to see you back here next Thursday. We're going to have Melissa White as a guest. She is the current chair of the Atlanta Apartment Association. So we're extremely excited to welcoming her to the Multifamily Hangout. Have an amazing afternoon.
Thank you, everyone.